when I found Wirt. He was very near a room that sounds like the vile pit you've described. The stench of death was heavy in the air, and consumed as I was with getting the lad to safety, I did not go further than I had to. If he claims to know something of that place, I would not discount his word easily.
The villagers of Diablo 1 are bound to the town, seemingly unable to leave at the sadistic whim of the Lord of Terror, while he patiently regains his strength in the bowels beneath the now unholy cathedral. Yet there is one unlikely outcast living on the fringes of Tristram who may aid the hero in destroying the evil that has taken the town hostage. A peg-legged boy who is secretly plotting his own escape, though only when his goal is right. Yet his story becomes more complicated as we learn he had chosen to risk what's left of his battered body and sanity for a chance at love. This is the tragic story and end of Wirt, the peg-legged boy. Wirt is a character in Diablo 1, found above the town of Tristram away from the main settlement, making it a little bit of a hike to visit him, though why he stays away from the town will soon make sense. See, Wirt's story is connected indelibly with his in-game function, and when we first meet the boy, when approached, he will beckon us over in a hushed whisper, giving the immediate warning his dealings are perhaps of the illicit nature, as he surreptitiously says,
"Psst, over here."
Wirt will then offer to sell a single expensive item, but the item in question is only revealed to the player if we churn out a hefty 50 gold just for a peek, which honestly is a rudimentary form of gambling and as such is not always in the player's favour.
I don't have a spell ready.
Now, as a quick piece of housekeeping as we continue Wirt's story, I'm going to be using something called the Beelzebub HD mod, which not only makes the graphics look a lot better, but also has Wirt wander closer to town so he's easier to access, and we'll find him plumped by the tree next to Jillian's house, which will make perfect sense later. But for now, it should be noted, in regard to the boy's self-interested aid to the hero, Wirt possesses 3 distinct general pieces of gossip, which are meant to help the player in their journey, as well as add to the overall story, such as the self-aggrandizing remark.
In case you haven't noticed, I don't buy anything from Tristram. I am an importer of quality goods. If you want to peddle your junk, you'll have to see Griswold, Pepin, or that witch Adria. I'm sure they'll snap up whatever you can bring them.
Also, the sage piece of wisdom when it comes to Farnham the Drunk's advice.
Don't trust everything the drunk says. Too many ales have fogged his vision and his good sense.
And perhaps the most insightful piece of advice when it comes to some items and less useful townsfolk.
Not everyone in Tristram has a use or a market for everything you'll find in the labyrinth. Not even me, as hard as that is to believe. Sometimes only you will be able to find a purpose for some things.
However, to discover clues as to why a young boy no more than 10 years old is an amputee outcast turned mean-spirited merchant, plus what may stop the boy from spending the gold he so happily hoards, we shall first speak to Wirt's fellow villagers to learn of his history through general gossip/quest dialogue, and then his ties to specific quests, learning more of the dark origin of his disability, as well as his questionable ability to procure high-value items, in which Adria the Witch cognizes.
I sense a soul in search of answers. There is much about the future we cannot see, but when it comes, it will be the children who wield it. The boy Wirt has a blackness upon his soul, but he poses no threat to the town or its people. His secretive dealings with the urchins and unspoken guilds of nearby towns gain him access to many devices that cannot be easily found in Tristram. While his methods may be reproachful, Wirt can provide assistance for your battle against the encroaching darkness.
A fairly poignant piece of insight on the boy's dealings and spiritual malady. And just as a quick aside, if you're wondering why Wirt and Adria are the only two townsfolk to mispronounce Tristram as Tristram, it's because they're voiced by the same voice actress, Lani Minella. Now try and unhear it. Back to Wirt's thoughts on the witch. Though Wirt, being the pragmatic tradesman, is openly aggrieved not just by Adria's foresight, but more so the reclusive witch's inexplicable ability to procure more esoteric items than the boy.
Adria truly bothers me. Sure, Cain is creepy in what he can tell you about the past, but that witch can see into your past. She always has some way to get whatever she needs, too. Adria gets her hands on more merchandise than I've seen pass through the gates of the King's Bazaar during High Festival.
Next up, the drunk Farnham speaks not of Wirt's mercantile ability, but rather, like Adria, the blackness on Wirt's soul.
Can't a fellow drink in peace? Wirt is a kid with more problems than even me, and I know all about problems. Listen here, that kid's got a sweet deal. He's been there, lost a leg. Gotta walk around on a piece of wood. So sad. So sad.
Where has he been, though? Farnham seems to be alluding to a treacherous place where Wirt lost a leg. When asking the boy about Farnham, it puts any question to where he lost his leg to rest.
Farnham, now there is a man with serious problems, and I know all about how serious problems can be. He trusted too much in the integrity of one man, and Lazarus led him into the very jaws of death. Oh, I know what it's like down there, so don't even start telling me about your plans to destroy the evil that dwells in that labyrinth. Just watch your legs.
What evil Wirt had faced, and that he cryptically alludes to, is something we shall soon discover as well. Speaking of the leg he lost, the healer Pepin empathizes.
What ails you, my friend? Poor Wirt. I did all that was possible for the child, but I know he despises that wooden peg that I was forced to attach to his leg. His wounds were hideous. No one, and especially such a young child, should have to suffer the way he did.
Imagining a young boy wounded in any capacity, let alone having them being described as quote-unquote hideous. Imagine Wirt losing a leg without the wonders of modern medicine and possibly anesthesia is almost too much to bear. Despite this, Wirt praises Pepin, saying,
As long as you don't need anything reattached, old Pepin is as good as they come. If I'd have had some of those potions he brews, I might still have my leg.
Speaking of Wirt's leg, let's look at the man who supposedly saved the boy from whatever attacked him down in the labyrinth, as Wirt says of Griswold the blacksmith.
I guess I owe the blacksmith my life, what there is of it. Sure, Griswold offered me an apprenticeship at the smithy. He's a nice enough guy, but I'll never get enough money to... Well, let's just say that I have definite plans that require a large amount of gold.
But what are these plans that Wirt has conjured that require copious amounts of gold? Griswold instead shows paternal concern for the boy he saved, admitting,
Well, what can I do for you? That lad is going to get himself into serious trouble. Or I guess I should say, again. I've tried to interest him in working here and learning an honest trade, but he prefers the high profits of dealing in goods of dubious origin. I cannot hold that against him after what happened to him, but I do wish he would at least be careful.
Speaking of another man invested in Wirt's future, Wirt says of his dealings with the elderly Cain.
Cain knows too much. He scares the life out of me, even more than that woman across the river. He keeps telling me about how lucky I am to be alive and how my story is foretold in legend. I think he's off his crock.
It's only when speaking to Deckard Cain do we learn the full extent of the horrors of his past, as Cain recalls.
Hello, my friend. Stay a while and listen. The story of Wirt is a frightening and tragic one. He was taken from the arms of his mother and dragged into the labyrinth by the small, foul demons that wield wicked spears. There were many other children taken that day, including the son of King Leoric. The knights of the palace went below, but never returned. The blacksmith found the boy. but only after the foul beasts had begun to torture him for their sadistic pleasures.
This dark revelation draws forth so many questions, such as, why were many children, including Leoric's son, taken from the town of Tristram and dragged into the labyrinth by the demons? Now, just before we delve deeper into that disturbing tale, let's finish looking at dialogue with the two final villagers, Ogden and Gillian, both of whom have had little contact with the confronting demon occupation of the cathedral, and as such, they seem to be rather apathetic to Wirt's plight compared to their fellow townsfolk who have seen what the demons can do firsthand. As Ogden, the innkeeper, rather callously believes that Wirt's missing leg may be the boy's own doing, scoffing.
Greetings, good master. Welcome to the Tavern of the Rising Sun. Wirt is a rapscallion and a little scoundrel. He was always getting into trouble, and it's no surprise what happened to him. He probably went fooling about someplace that he shouldn't have been. I feel sorry for the boy, but I don't abide the company that he keeps.
It makes us wonder, which places has Wirt been fooling around that bothers Ogden so? Perhaps he's been scaring poor Ogden's cows, as there are rumours someone has been prodding them incessantly. There is also the matter of Ogden's missing sign, though that turned out to be the impish fallen demons. Wirt still got the bum rap.
What? Is he saying I took that? I suppose that Griswold is on his side too. Look, I got over simple sign stealing months ago. You can't turn a profit on a piece of wood.
Wirt, on the other hand, expresses apparent disdain for Ogden's lack of business acumen, right before admitting it's good he keeps the barmaid on, and his love for shepherd's pie.
Ogden is a fool for staying here. I could get him out of town for a very reasonable price, but he insists on trying to make a go of it with that stupid tavern. I guess at the least he gives Gillian a place to work, and his wife Garda does make a superb shepherd's pie.
Next, when speaking to Gillian, do we learn more of the boy's mother, Canis, and perhaps why he's grown cold since her death.
Good day. How may I serve you? I grew up with Wirt's mother, Canis. Although she was only slightly hurt when those hideous creatures stole him, she never recovered. I think she died of a broken heart. Wirt has become a mean-spirited youngster, looking only to profit from the sweat of others. I know that he suffered and has seen horrors that I cannot even imagine. But some of that darkness hangs over him still.
The orphaned Wirt then surprisingly gives us an admission when asking about Gillian, perhaps clearing up why he is saving gold. An admission which no doubt would shock the busty barmaid to hear.
If I were a few years older, I would shower her with whatever riches I could muster. And let me assure you, I could get my hands on some very nice stuff. Gillian is a beautiful girl who should get out of Tristram as soon as it is safe. Maybe I'll take her with me when I go.
Unfortunately, we'd learned two things that makes Wirt's tale of unrequited love seem like he may not ride off with Gillian into the sunset. One, Gillian doesn't look like she's going to leave Tristram anytime soon due to her ailing grandmother's health, as Ogden relays.
Gillian, my barmaid? If it were not for her sense of duty to her grandam, she would have fled from here long ago. Goodness knows I begged her to leave, telling her that I would watch after the old woman, but she is too sweet and caring to have done so. 2.
Unfortunately, Kane shares during cut content about the priest Tremaine why the villagers cannot simply leave the town.
Tremaine is an occasional visitor to our town and seems to have little problem coming and going. It is strange how at times anyone who tries to leave Tristram is hunted down and slain by the cloaked riders, and at other times it is a simple matter to leave. I think it is that uncertain fear that keeps some of us here. But we are glad for Tremaine's bravery and luck in keeping some contact with the rest of the kingdom.
Now, it should be noted, as expected, these Dark Riders are serving Diablo, and as such, it's only at his whim can some leave. And we shall discover why later in the video. But this also begs the question, is Wirt allowed to leave with his beloved Gillian? Or do the burning hells after getting a taste for the boy taking his leg, decide it's a meal worth finishing. Well, to answer this, we now need to delve into how the Lord of Terror has returned, and the real reason it's directly linked with demons targeting little boys of Tristram to torture. See, when entering level 3 of the catacombs, a new quest to find King Leoric's tomb is initiated, and Ogden, the innkeeper, beseeches.
The village needs your help, good master. Some months ago, King Leoric's son, Prince Albrecht, was kidnapped. The king went into a rage and scoured the village for his missing child. With each passing day, Leoric seemed to slip deeper into madness. He sought to blame innocent townsfolk for the boy's disappearance and had them brutally executed. Less than half of us survived his insanity. The king's knights and priests tried to placate him, but he turned against them and, sadly, they were forced to kill him.
So, as mentioned by Cain, the king's son, also around the same age as Wirt, and other boys were absconded with that night. By demons, it seems. It's only later revealed during a quest to hunt down the disappearing Archbishop Lazarus, Leoric's right hand, does Cain reveal.
The Archbishop Lazarus, once King Leoric's most trusted advisor, led a party of simple townsfolk into the labyrinth to find the king's missing son, Albrecht. Quite some time passed before they returned, and only a few of them escaped with their lives. Curse me for a fool! I should have suspected his veiled treachery then. It must have been Lazarus himself who kidnapped Albrecht and has since hidden him within the labyrinth. I do not understand why the Archbishop turned to the darkness, or what his interest is in the child. Unless he means to sacrifice him to his dark masters. That must be what he has planned. The survivors of his rescue party say that Lazarus was last seen running into the deepest bowels of the labyrinth. You must hurry and save the prince from the sacrificial blade of this demented fiend.
Griswold the blacksmith then recounts Lazarus's part in aiding the townsfolk to find Albrecht.
I was there when Lazarus led us into the labyrinth. He spoke of holy retribution, but when we started fighting those hellspawn, he did not so much as lift his mace against them. He just ran deeper into the dim, endless chambers that were filled with the servants of darkness.
An embittered Wirt then guides on Lazarus.
Yes, the righteous Lazarus, who is so effective against those monsters down there. And didn't help save my leg, did it? Look, I'll give you a free piece of advice. Ask Farnham. He was there.
Lazarus, being the reason for the failed excursion to save Albrecht, has Farnham break down, recalling.
They stab, then bite, then they're all around you. Liar! Liar! They're all dead. Dead! Do you hear me? They just keep falling and falling. The blood spilling out all over the floor. All his fault.
And it seems things are somehow actually worse than they appear, as when we confront the bastard Lazarus, he's standing over the corpse of a young boy who he had just sacrificed, taunting.
Abandon your foolish quest. All that awaits you is the wrath of my master. You are too late to save the child. Now you will join him.
Time to
When
die.
we kill him for his transgressions.
Your business ends here, betrayer.
It's Cain who then muses.
Your story is quite grim, my friend. Lazarus will surely burn in hell for his horrific deed. The boy that you describe is not our prince. But I believe that Albrecht may yet be in danger. The symbol of power that you speak of must be a portal in the very heart of the labyrinth. Know this, my friend. The evil that you move against is the Dark Lord of Terror. He is known to mortal men as Diablo. It was he who was imprisoned within the labyrinth many centuries ago, and I fear that he seeks to once again sow chaos in the realm of mankind. You must venture through the portal and destroy Diablo before it is too late.
Now, why Diablo had Lazarus target young boys needs to be exposed before we circle back to how and why Wirt suffered his specific hellish torture and loss of his leg. See, it's only after the heroes kill the Lord of Terror does his hideous form show itself to be somewhat of a nightmarish guise covering the body of the very Prince Albrecht, containing Diablo's essence, which must be housed in a victim for the Lord of Terror to have a host. But why would a primeval target a 10-year-old prince, specifically as his host, instead of, say, a powerful warrior? And how does that relate to the other children of Tristram's suffering? Well, originally, a weakened Diablo, being housed in the Soul Stone for an age, first had corrupted Lazarus in aiding him taking over King Leoric when they moved into Tristram. Although it ultimately drove the king mad, Diablo realised that Leoric's will was too strong in his weakened state, and turned away from the pious king, pouring his efforts into a poor Prince Albrecht, feeding on the young boy's terror and innocence. In fact, the demons that spawned in the labyrinth, as well as the labyrinth taking on hellish attributes and Diablo's form, were all said to have been inspired by the terror that Diablo cultivated within Albrecht's waking nightmare. However, there were two subsequent events that transpired now that Diablo took on a new host in Albrecht. The first was that Diablo was still weakened and needed time to feed on the boy's terror. As stated in the cut map of the Stars quest, Diablo would become nigh invincible if we didn't kill him once he reached his full potential.
Our time is running short. I sense his dark power building, and only you can stop him from attaining his full might.
So, the second event that brings us back to Wirt is obviously Lazarus when first kidnapping Albrecht. It seems the Archbishop was trying to throw off the scent of the villagers that he was targeting the prince specifically to become a host for Diablo, and so we had demons kidnap basically every boy in the village, including Wirt. But things actually get darker. Remember the boy Lazarus was sacrificing? Well, we have seen adult bodies strewn about in Diablo 1 constantly, so why did Lazarus take time to sacrifice a boy? I believe, whether it was Prince Albrecht's kinship to boys or worse yet, Diablo, gorging on Albrecht's terror, had a taste for young boys' fear, and as previously stated, the Dark Riders had kept certain villagers quarantined and afraid as Diablo fed on their terror and grew in power. This innocence seems to be his drug of choice, as Wirt, although not needed, was gifted to a rather foul demon himself as a plaything, which we're about to discuss. See, Cain had previously told us that it was the Fallen that had kidnapped Wirt, what with them being small and attacking at night as seen during Ogden's side quest, plus they're the only demons wielding spears. As disturbing as it is to imagine Wirt surrounded by these screeching fiends, cutting and gnawing and biting as Farnham stated, we learn from Wirt he was taken to a specific place, the lair of the Butcher, an overlord demon which Farnham the Drunk had nicknamed, who lay in wait for the doomed villagers to attempt to rescue Albrecht on level 2 of the labyrinth. A harrowing tale that broke poor Farnham.
Big cleaver, killing all my friends. Couldn't stop him, had to run away, couldn't save them. Trapped in a room with so many bodies, so many friends. No!
A harrowing tale that's the reason for poor Farnham's alcoholism. Griswold also remembers.
I saw what Farnham calls the Butcher, as it swathed a path through the bodies of my friends. He swung a cleaver as large as an axe, hewing limbs and cutting down brave men where they stood. I was separated from the fray by a host of small screeching demons, and somehow found the stairway leading out. I never saw that hideous beast again, but his blood-stained visage haunts me to this day.
And Wirt himself actually possessed morbid dialogue about his time in the Butcher's care.
I know more than you think about that grisly fiend. His little friends got a hold of me and managed to get my leg before Griswold pulled me out of that hole. I'll put it bluntly. Kill him before he kills you and adds your corpse to his collection!
Now, this is probably news to people who haven't experienced Diablo's extensive cut content and dialogue, but the Butcher was originally not meant to spring forth from his lair and say his famous line,
Fresh meat.
Instead, he would possess his own dungeon, which the player must discern how to access, only through dialogue with the villagers. Wirt himself would have originally experienced so much trauma from even the mere mention of this hulking brute that his speech would deteriorate completely.
Hear over, psst! Chamber Butcher, the from Spell Portal Town the cast! Saying am I what see? Get out it figured you haven't? Understand could you even so simple it make to try-die? Chamber Butcher, the from Spell Portal Town the cast!
Obviously, he gives us a clue to cast a town portal in the Butcher's original lair. But funnily enough, others, such as Ogden, upon hearing Wirt's apparent propensity in regressing when speaking about the Butcher, has exactly 0 shits to give.
Wirt is talking backwards again? Oh, I hate it when he does that. I don't have time to help you decipher his riddle, but I will tell you one thing. Don't get involved with that rapscallion.
Cain, on the other hand, shares one of his most gruesome and heartbreaking revelations not seen in the final release.
You must have been speaking with Wirt. His is a sad story indeed. That poor child was taken into the labyrinth by the demons, ripped from the very arms of his mother, Canis. May her soul rest in peace. The boy managed to escape, but only after they had chewed off his leg, and he has not been quite sane since. He often speaks in riddles, but his knowledge of the labyrinth may hold some truth.
So, Wirt's leg was not cut, but chewed off, which is absolutely vile. But what happened to Wirt after Diablo was slain? Did he make it out of Tristram with the Dark Riders supposedly gone? Was he able to take the small fortune he amassed by grifting the heroes for a peek at his wares, and finally whisk Gillian away, nestling at her ample breast, for comfort as they rode into the sunset happily ever after? In Diablo 2, we learn the warrior, post-felling the Lord of Terror, becomes Diablo's host, taking the Soul Stone into his own head rather forcefully. After departing Tristram, heading east to desperately search for aid, a horde of demons follow in his wake, starting in the newly cleansed town of Tristram, after they celebrate the primeval's destruction prematurely. When the heroes of Diablo 2 search the burning town of Tristram, looking for the lost Deckard Cain, but stunned by the sight of the unspeakable blasphemies that have transpired to the old inhabitants. Worse yet, we find the corpse of the peg-legged boy Wirt, who hadn't gotten far from his old tree, and clearly didn't make it out with Gillian as he'd once hoped. Approaching his body, we find the boy is splayed out on his back, lying in a pool of his own blood with bloody footprints nearby. And we'll soon discuss, officially, who was responsible for his death. But first, the developers added a dark callback to the boy's vocation, as he was known to greedily take the player's gold for a peek at his wares. However, this time, we find, he pays us back in full. Scooping up said gold, we can also pop off his peg leg, which has lore of its own that is tied to Wirt's grisly fate. See, by combining Wirt's infamous leg with a scroll of town portal, players could access an infamous secret cow level. Inaccurately rumoured to exist in the first game, the developers thought it was best to add it into the second, where the player could fight a herd of hell bovine. But what does this have to do with Wirt? Well, remember how I said somebody had been annoying the cows of Tristram? On the flavour text for these bipedal bovines it reads, "Given sentience by Diablo, and driven mad by the incessant prodding they suffered at the hands of the heroes that swarmed to Tristram, these hell-spawned bovines seek to destroy those who abused them when they were docile and defenseless. Armed with vicious halberds, they lie in wait just on the other side of a secret portal that is opened with the quote-unquote help of the first victim." So Wirt was the first to be killed by the cows. Worse yet, the text indicates the player is responsible, not only for their creation, but also Wirt's demise, as the cows were driven mad by our own desire to discover a secret cow level that never existed in Diablo 1, only for the bovines to strike back, actually creating their own cow level and lying in wait for our return. And worst of all, Wirt may have survived if we, collectively, weren't so curious. Things don't end there for poor Wirt. His lore continues in Diablo 3. As, in Diablo 2, we learn the Fallen weren't just mindless demons, but had their own important figures in their culture. Sometimes they would call out said Fallen's name, one of which was Bishibosh, who the heroes had subsequently killed. We can, however, find the remains of Bishibosh, who randomly spawns in the Den of the Fallen in Diablo 3. He also can drop a legendary item, being a skeletal mace named Wirt's original leg, reading, once belonging to a disgruntled lad named Wirt. This leg was amputated after he suffered grievous wounds at the hands of the demonic torturers near the town of Tristram. Fallen, no doubt proud of their handiwork, must have gifted the remains to Bishibosh in deference, almost like a rabbit-foot necklace, except this was a 10-year-old boy's leg he carried as a souvenir and possibly weapon, after learning of every horror the boy had faced. I have no doubt that if Ogden were around to hear this story, he would still give zero shits about Wirt's tragic life and downfall.
I'll bet that Wirt saw you coming and put on an act just so he could laugh at you later when you're running around the town with your nose in the dirt. I'd ignore it.